I want you to imagine being in a room, or rather walking into a room. And in this room, there are about 15 people. You've got 15 people standing around the room, and there's one guy who's been appointed the leader. So he welcomes you into the room. You say hi to everybody. And then you look at the corner of the room and you notice that there's somebody in the corner. Either they're sitting down, they look defeated. And what's very particular about them is that they have duct tape over their mouth. So you're in this room, you see all these people functioning normally. They're walking around, they're chatting with each other. Everybody's having a great time, but you still notice the individual who's sitting in the corner of the room being silenced. After you've been in this room for about 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, everybody's different. It's all a matter of degree on when you question something. It's not a matter of if you question it. It's just a matter of when you question something. So you go to this leader and you tell him, well, why is that guy being silenced? And the leader will then divulge the thought of the collective. Don't listen to him because he's this. Don't listen to him because he's that. He's harmful because of this and he's harmful because of that. So you say, okay, I'll take your word for it. So you spend another few hours in this room, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. And then you begin to question, okay, or not even question. Now you're just wondering, what is it about that individual that has made them quiet or made the collective keep them quiet, rather? So you ask him again, well, why is it again that he has duct tape over his mouth? And the leader again says, well, it's because he's crazy. He's wild. He's got crazy opinions. We shouldn't listen to him. He's ill-informed. It's only natural that eventually what's going to happen is that you're going to start being really curious about this person. And let's fast forward, okay? Let's just destroy and deconstruct my entire analogy for the sake of this video. And let's say you somehow happen to rip that piece of duct tape off this person's mouth. Whatever comes out of that person's mouth is going to be interesting. It's going to be entertaining because that person's mouth is then going to become the forbidden fruit. It's just what happens psychologically as human beings when we hide something, when we deprive others of certain things. The minute we get a hold of that thing, it's something new. It's something different. It's something of interest. It's something that we reflect or it reflects on us because there is a level of curiosity and of interest in all of us. Even though we'd like to deny it, we'd like to think that we're normal and we're practical and we go about our day in a regular fashion, you all feel like there's something unique about you. So when you hear this person, there's a part of you that connects with that person, right? Or would connect with that person if you were within that room with 15 people. Now I want you to think about the scenario in a different way. Now I want you to think in the scenario in terms of you coming into that room, same amount of people, you still got the leader, but this person is no longer duct tape. Now when you've walked into the room, they're just a part of the room, but they still have their own unique thoughts, their own unique opinions, except the room is just letting them go about their way. So what would you think about that person? How would you perceive that person? You would perceive that person quite differently. You may connect with the things that they have to say. You may agree. You may disagree. But there's one thing that you're not going to do is that you're not going to think of this person as interesting as you originally did in the first scenario. That person may have radical thoughts. That person may be ill-informed, but the collective hasn't silenced the person. They haven't added this extra amount of interest on this person because they let them speak. It's sort of an act of indifference, if you will. I think that's really what it breaks down to in the second scenario. It's the indifference that the collective has to that person. and how they let that person talk, and they're not fully against it. They're not fully for it. They treat that person as if they were in the collective just on the basis of being a human being, not basing it on opinions, but just the fact that they are a human being that has rights. The worst thing that you want to do with a person who is ill-informed and a person who is dangerous to society due to the things that they say, the worst thing that you want to do is to tell other people that they shouldn't listen to them or to create laws that silence them. Because what happens with those people is that they go into hiding. And then they go into hiding and they are either employed or taken under the wing of your enemy. Because then they become the friend of your enemy. Because you silence them. Because they've been exiled from their original group. This is what happens throughout human history. You silence someone, they go into hiding. They become stronger. Their arguments don't become stronger, but they become strengthened because of your resistance, because of your desire to not allow them to speak. Those malleable minds, those young minds will then be intrigued by this person, not because of what they say, but because they become that forbidden fruit. They become that cookie jar with those shitty vanilla wafers in the jar, and they're kept on top of the refrigerator and you're told not to touch them. Those cookies are a lot more appealing than the cookies that are just sitting on the desk or on the dining room table because they have to reach for it. The best way to control an erratic, I won't even say control. The best way to deal with an erratic individual who's hurtful to the collective, who is ill-informed, who is emotionally unstable, is to treat them like they are a part of the collective, because they are. The collective isn't the collective because of opinions. The collective is the collective because we are people. And the minute that we start to treat them any differently, that's when we have a problem. You take the MAGA hat, for example. Now, the MAGA hat, to me, is a pure indication of ambiguity. It's a pure indication on symbolic speech. What has symbolic speech always done in this country? Symbolic speech has always given people the opportunity to say things via a vessel or a tool. That's what's always happened. That's what's happened with Colin Kaepernick. That's what's always going to continue to happen. That's what happens with logos. I've told you about the Nike logo before. I've told you about the idea of just do it. The ambiguity of the phrase just do it is exactly what makes it work. I've heard people draw incorrect parallels to the MAGA hat and say that the MAGA hat is the new Nazi sign. It's like wearing an ISIS hat. First of all, that's incredibly flawed because there is nothing ambiguous about a Nazi sign. There is nothing ambiguous about it. If you lived in Nazi Germany at the time, you could revere it as a sign of pride. But far and wide, especially within this country, this is the only place where we get to make that distinction. So in Nazi Germany, you don't get to make that distinction with that government. You get to make that distinction because you live in the United States of America. So if you look at that Nazi sign and you live here today, you can revere it for what it represented if you have some lineage to that society, or if you celebrate Hitler for whatever reason because of his strategy or his ideals or whatever the fuck. I'm not saying you're wrong for that, but the fact that you live in this country is the only reason why you can look at it as an ambiguous symbol. But it's not. At its core, it's not. What it represents is something completely different than your interpretation. The MAGA hat is ambiguous because of the word again. The word again is the most important word in that phrase. If it was just make America great, as Kanye suggested it to be, make America great isn't as controversial, but again dives into the past, again dives into people's past. And what you're always going to find with people is that the past means something completely different to everybody. I feel that maybe you got the one up on me in the past. Maybe I feel I didn't get my fair share in the past, or maybe I wasn't treated right in the past. And the past could have been just a week ago. The past could have been 50 years ago. It doesn't matter. Again, it's totally ambiguous. It's saying nothing and saying something at the same time. So you can't equate a Nazi symbol to something that says make America great again. Colin Kaepernick kneeled. He kneeled, and just like the MAGA hat, people see it completely differently. People say he kneeled because he's being unpatriotic and he doesn't love his country. Other people are saying he's kneeling, and he's saying as well that he's kneeling because he wants to protest police brutality and the broken justice system. But it doesn't matter, because people get to view it any way they want to view it and say that it's symbolic speech. Well, in other countries, you can't do that. In other countries, a totalitarian government, it doesn't matter what the fuck you say. There's no ambiguity. There's no ambiguity. You understand what I'm saying? The MAGA hat only works because it is ambiguous. It's the only reason why Kanye can wear it, because it can mean something completely different to him. Now, I don't know how you extract a Superman cape from it. I have no idea how that happens. But in its ambiguity, it's what makes it powerful. And people choosing to shun him away or to silence him is totally the wrong approach. The best way to deal with someone like that is to be indifferent towards them. And that means to not deify them and not vilify them. Do neither. Listen to them, because we all know that he was able to bring something of value to this world. So he has something of value to say. And you are not a clinical psychologist. I'm sorry to say, with the hundreds of people that are diagnosing Kanye West, and just because he said it, all of a sudden you want to take that at face value, which is very ironic, by the way. If you tell yourself that you're listening to somebody who has a mental condition and you disregard everything they say other than the fact that they say that they have a mental condition, now you want to take that at face value. You know, you want to take that at face value because it's convenient to your argument. I'm not saying that he doesn't have a mental illness. I'm just saying that people are diagnosing him. They're saying he's bipolar. They're saying all these things. They're even calling him narcissistic, which people often confuse with arrogance. Narcissism is that's something that only a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I'm not even sure. One prescribes and the other one doesn't. That's only something that a doctor can diagnose you as. That's not like calling somebody cocky or arrogant. You know, narcissism is a diagnosis. So that's ironic that you have so many people who aren't experts in a certain area, and they're coloring him with all these different ailments and mental sicknesses, and disregarding him in that sense, which I find to be very ironic. But that's not really the point of this video. The point of this video, or the point of this rant, is to get across to at least some of you that when you disagree with people, you can't get alarmed. You cannot react like Don Lemon. You can't, or you shouldn't, hear somebody speak and project your feelings upon them, because this is something that's very deep that's happening, or that's happened. This is something very deep where the culture is hearing the words of a man and they're saying, oh my God, this is about his mother. People taking like very Freudian sort of attacks at someone. This is getting very deep, and it's really going to be ineffective. It's going to be ineffective because there are curious minds out there, whether you want to believe it or not. And there are some stupid people out there. You know, there are some people they're full with postmodern thought, and they like to believe that fact is no longer a factor. That's it. What you consider a fact was just a part of a construct that was made by the patriarchy. It was created by white supremacy. Whatever entity that you want to name it, fact and all of history was just constructed by the systems that controlled us. So what we call fact is no longer fact. There is only my truth. There's no more truth. There's no more objective truth. There is now my truth. And people will listen to Kanye, and that's when people become dangerous and they are enabled by someone like Kanye. That's what happened with Trump. You had people that just said, well, you know what? Facts don't matter. News doesn't matter. Everything is fake. You know, they just went with the sort of postmodern thing where it's like, we're just going to reinvent society in our minds and just let's go. And that's when you have dangerous people doing stupid things. Now, in the case of Kanye, I don't think you're going to have people doing dangerous things. I think what you'll have is people who their process of communicating things will get completely skewed. You know, the way they look at the political system will be completely skewed. The way they look at the world will be completely skewed. It'll just be whatever interpretation that they come up with in their head. That's going to be truth. Because Kanye told me that these systems of control, which there's a lot of truth in what Kanye's saying. As I said before, he's somebody who's brought in value to this world. So there's small nuggets of truth, but in order to be able to discern what's bullshit and what's true, is that you have to allow people to make that up for themselves. You have to allow people to be smart enough. You have to allow people to be, or you have to have the confidence that people are intelligent enough to be able to discern what is bullshit and what is not. If you believe that the public is made up of stupid people that are so impressionable that you have to protect them and tell the masses, don't listen to this guy, stop listening to him, then you've already sort of put yourself in a condescending position. You've already, essentially putting yourself in the position as the parent who is tasting or not tasting or testing out the Halloween candy before your kids can consume it because you think it's poisonous, because you think your child isn't going to be smart enough or your child isn't able, to sort of to monitor their own, what they consume, if it's poisonous or not. So you're doing this parental thing where you tell people, don't stop it, just cover your ears, because you don't believe that people are smart enough to make that distinction. If you want to use the argument of, well, there's a lot of young people out there. Well, let me tell you something, man. I'm going to tell you this candidly. There's young people out there, at the age of 12 who are a lot fucking smarter than I was at the age of 12 because of the information. It's natural. It's just how human progression is just going to go. If you have access to information, there was access to information for me, but that information only came in two places when I was 12 years old, and I wasn't interested in looking in either of those places. That information was either in school or at a library. It was available here in books, and I read several books as a child, but not many. I wasn't ever a huge reader, but I read some. But the fact is information readily being available to you is only going to make you a more informed individual, and it'll make you better at critical thinking. So if you trust in the fact that the youth is just going to be smart enough, then why the fuck are you panicking? Why the fuck are you panicking? When you hear somebody talk about prison reform, and then in the next sentence they jump off and say something like, oh, that's why I wanted a $300 tax break because of Adidas. And if you don't think a 15-year-old looks at that and they're like, well, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, then your faith in humanity is very, very, it's dim. It's completely dim if you can't see that anyone between the ages of 7 between 7 and 15 or whatever the fuck, you get my point. A young person can discern bullshit from actual quality. So indifference is the best way that you can go about it. If you agree with Kanye, that's great. If you agree with him and you relate to what he's saying, because over the years we've heard a lot of Kanye rants. We've heard Kanye say a lot of things, and there's been some truth. When Kanye talks about mind control and about society, there's a lot of truth to that, because most human beings can say that there is mind control. There's mind control with media. There's mind control with logos. There's mind control with symbols. There's mind control with skin color. There's mind control with sex. There's mind control with a lot of things in this country, and that's anybody makes that connection. But the fact is that you don't have major artists giving you that kind of information, or at least trying to give you that sort of information. And I think that's valuable because he's doing it. He's lucky enough that at this point in his life, he's been so radical and he's been so fringe, I guess, if that's the right word that I could use. He's been so fringe that this doesn't affect his bottom line, because this is the Kanye brand. And because it's the Kanye brand, we're going off into sort of a technological era where there's a lot of big artists, but there's not a lot of big artists that can say anything they want. He can say whatever he wants. So if that's the case, then I think it's up to us to preserve Kanye. And the best way to preserve Kanye is to let Kanye speak even when he seems like he shouldn't. Because eventually, if we have any faith in 15-year-olds, which I do, if we have any faith in the youth, we should have the faith of a 40-something-year-old man having the ability of getting his personal life in order, his mental life in order, getting all of that in order, and eventually speaking with a conscience. And that doesn't mean that he's going to be liberal about things. That doesn't mean he's not going to be a conservative. I don't care what Kanye's political views are. Kanye's political views have nothing to do with my life. I have no interest in what he thinks politically. But once he gets all of that in order, he's going to have something of value to offer, even more so than he does now. It's just very scatterbrained. But again, with indifference comes the confidence that we can handle this. This is nothing. Don't panic and don't silence, because eventually children will be curious. Malleable minds will be curious. And if that person has duct tape over their mouth, they are going to wonder what this person has to say. And when they remove that tape from their mouth, it doesn't have to be relevant. It doesn't have to be conscientious. It doesn't have to be intelligent. It just has to be different. And then it becomes entertainment. Then it becomes curiosity. Then it becomes wonder. And then they get to connect to it the same way they connect to a fucking TV show. And that's how you get Donald Trump. And that's how you're going to get the worst version of Kanye if you choose to silence him. What do you guys think about the topic of silencing Kanye? What do you think about the topic of just silencing Kanye? Just being done with Kanye once again, because this is a conversation that we always have to have as he moves the needle forward and forward. It's a question that always has to be asked. Please let me know in the comment section below, and I will see you guys next time.